Okay, greetings. Hello, this is Dr. Thomas Daffern speaking to you again. I'm feeling the need to communicate a few things for my colleagues, students, friends and so on in relation to contemporary world events, because things are happening so fast in the world community. I have a duty to speak out. I'm simply an academic and a philosopher and historian, but I think we have a duty, those intellectuals of us that are still awake, to actually comment on world affairs. Now, the thing that really has upset me, and the reason I'm talking, is this murder in Turkey, in Istanbul, in the Saudi Arabian consulate, of a Saudi intellectual, Jamal Kashoggi. I never met him, but I read about his life story, and I've met many people from a similar kind of background. You know, I used to teach in London at the University of London in contemporary peace studies, Middle Eastern affairs and so on. I've met many people from the Gulf. I've travelled, widely internationally, and I've been studying peace ever since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and in 1979 and the chaos and confusion that followed that. And I've had many Muslim friends. I used to teach at the Muslim College in London with Dr. Zaki Badawi, who was a consummate intellectual in the Islamic world. He was a graduate of the University in Cairo, and so, in my doctoral thesis, I've explored how we can make peace intellectually between the different religions of the world. So this is a test case for me, and it's a complete failure. It's a cataclysmic failure in the world's intellectual fault lines that, a normal kind of intellectual, a journalist, a scholar like Kashoggi can go into an embassy expecting a marriage certificate, and he instead gets chopped up into pieces and cruelly murdered and tortured, apparently. Now, and I'm here taking as evidence the audio tapes, the videotapes that the Turkish government now says it has hold of, and the American government now says it has hold of some of this evidence. I find this utterly shocking, and it's therefore that's why I'm speaking out. Now, I'm speaking out on behalf of my institute, which is the Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, that specialises in peace research, peace studies, peace policy thinking, and also global philosophical studies. So I'm a specialist in world comparative philosophy, including Islam, but also all the other great philosophical traditions of the planet. And I'm also speaking out on behalf of the World Intellectual Forum, which met here recently, the first time in Europe. We're part of a worldwide network of scholars and intellectuals around the planet. And I'm utterly appalled, if we were trying to set up a Saudi Arabian network for the World Intellectual Forum, someone like this Kashoggi would have been a good person to help with it. And yet here we have intellectuals being literally dismembered. It shows to me a level of primitive barbarism that I think is utterly unacceptable. And it's time for the world's intellectuals, the world's academics and scholars to say enough is enough. We have to stop this barbarous war machine that has now come to do such acts and thinks it can get away with it. Now, who was responsible? Okay, I don't personally think the King of Saudi Arabia was responsible for this. I don't think he probably knew. I may be wrong, but I can't believe that a monarch of such standing would have sanctioned such a cruel and terrible thing. The Crown Prince, possibly, who seems to have had a personal hatred for this man. There was a kind of personal rivalry, a sort of adolescent street fight going on. It's very possible. In which case the man should be sacked. The king should step forward, set up a royal commission of inquiry, find out who did this murder in the Saudi embassy, sentence them all, find out, get their confessions, and if the trail of criminality goes back to the Crown Prince, that man should be arrested immediately and put in jail. It's very probable that he thought he's so powerful now that he can do this kind of thing and get away with it. Power corrupts, as Lord Acton said, and so people that get a whiff of power think that they can act immorally. It's utterly scandalous, and we philosophers and intellectual leaders should be reminding people in power that they don't have the authority to act in that way. That's what they used to do in the days of Stalin. I mean, in Europe, there was cruelty and barbarism. That's what they did in the days of Hitler, when totalitarian regimes would arrest intellectuals and just have them tortured and killed, you know, and dismembered, probably sometimes. Those days we put behind us in the West and in Europe. And I don't want to be part of a world where that is still kind of normality. So I think a royal commission from the King of Saudi Arabia should be instituted immediately and should get to the truth. The one absolute thing here that we have to hold on to is truth. Who actually did this? What on earth was in their mind thinking this is a good idea? And then they should be punished. That's called justice, right? But they shouldn't be, I mean, in Saudi law they would be executed, but they shouldn't be until they've given a full confession. Otherwise it's just, you know, yet another cover-up. And however high this goes up to in the Saudi regime, they should all be punished. And if it goes up to the king, I'm sorry, but if the king is implicated, and if he said to the crown prince, oh yeah, fine, have him slaughtered, then I think it's an abdication issue. And every single Saudi citizen should be on this case and watching it. Now there isn't, so far as I know, a constitution in Saudi Arabia. It's what they call an absolute monarchy. I think this shows up the need for some kind of constitutional reform. That country is long past having some kind of democratic safeguards on its people, when they think they can act like this with such impunity. The French, here I'm speaking from France, we used to have an absolute monarchy, who used to do terrible deeds, but then there was a revolution, and the idea of liberty, equality and fraternity replaced this idea that some people are above the law. Louis XIV said, you know, the state, it's me, I am the state, I can do what I want. No, you can't. We're all answerable to the law, as Jean Baudin said, the great French intellectual, who invented the concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty is a sacred trust, it comes from God, ultimately, and nobody's above that. And whether you're a king or a commoner, you all come under the law. So I would say that Saudi Arabia, this is a time for deep soul searching. And I would be very happy to network with genuine intellectuals in Saudi Arabia who want a moderate, peaceful, democratic transformation of that society, as Kashoggi did. I believe that, from what I can tell, he wanted authentic Islam, not a sort of fanatical Islam, like the Wahhabi fanatical Islam that, you know, will stone you to death for kissing your boyfriend or whatever, and imprisons people for holding hands in public. You know, that sort of fanatical Wahhabi notion is not Islam at all. I've studied Islam in detail. I am, to some extent, an initiated Sufi, and, you know, I would probably say, to some extent, I am a surrendered soul. The idea of a Muslim is someone who surrenders to the absolute and hands over sovereignty back to the supreme Lord of the universe. Well, in that case, I'm a Muslim, I'm a surrendered soul. I don't follow the outer practices of Islam because I believe those are contingencies, as I've said in my commentary on the Quran. You know, I think to be a philosophical Muslim is a whole different thing than being someone that wears the right clothes and does the prayers 5 times a day and so on. And I don't think that it's necessary for mankind to pursue the outer trappings of Islam. But I do think that we all have to surrender to the absolute. And I think that's what Kashoggi realised. I think he was a genuine Muslim in that deeper sense. And that's why he was a threat to the establishment in Saudi Arabia that is promoting this idea of Saudi Wahhabism, as if that's Islam. That's no more Islam than, sort of forms of churchianity are authentic teachings of Jesus Christ. I'm interested as a philosopher in the core teachings of the sages and saints of mankind, be it Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Mahavira, whatever, or Plato or Aristotle, and finding their commonalities. Now, I don't know how profoundly intellectual Kashoggi was, but I think he would have understood what I'm saying. And if he's listening in from beyond the grave, you know, I lament his passing. I also want to say something about the other thing that this throws into relief is the Saudi role in geopolitics at the moment is, I think, abysmal. The kind of people that think they can cut up intellectuals and get away with it are also bombing Yemen and ruining and desecrating what was once a beautiful, amazing civilization in the south of Arabia because they're the wrong kind of Muslims, they're Shias. And they've created this whole witch hunt against Shiism in Saudi Arabia. The Saudi regime erases Shia villages because they're the wrong kind of Muslims. And they seem to deny basic human rights to Shias. Now, I feel as a philosopher of comparative religion and Islam that this is scandalous, because the Sunni-Shia split goes right back to the life of Muhammad himself, okay? And it's basically the people that followed Ali, who was his son-in-law and a very, very clever, wise, illuminated successor to Muhammad, who was there at all the key situations in Muhammad's life, and who was there mostly when he received the verses that became the Quran. You know, Ali was his closest friend, and he was so close to Muhammad that Muhammad let him marry his daughter, Fatima. Now, you know, I have 3 daughters. It's a very special thing to marry somebody's daughter. It shows the trust Muhammad put in Ali. The people that follow Ali are what we now call the Shias, but in their own minds, they're the authentic Muslims. And they were persecuted by the other lot. The other lot are called the Sunnis, who followed the teachings of Muhammad's last wife, or not last chronologically, but his youngest wife, who was called Aisha. Now, Aisha was the daughter of one of the big merchants of Mecca who supported Muhammad. He was like the banker of early Islam, Abu Bakr. And Aisha was very pretty, very beautiful, feminine, and all that. And Muhammad initially married her as a kind of a way to get on in the world. His wife had died, Khadija, who he loved, and so then he marries Aisha, who was at the time only 9 years old. This is scandalous to Western people who talk about, child abuse and so on. The teaching in Islam is that the marriage wasn't consummated till after she reached about the age of 12. There's still debate, it's not absolutely known. What we have to realise, of course, that customs are very different in those days. People lived shorter lives, maybe 40, 50, so people became sexually active at puberty, 13 and so on. So, the marriage age was much younger. So I don't think I'm not going to condemn Muhammad for that, because that was the custom. What I do think is strange is that, you see, she was only 18 when he died. Muhammad died at the age of 63. He didn't live really to complete his work fully. Prophets often, don't. But at least he didn't get killed off like Jesus was or something. But he left to his last, most beloved wife, Aisha. He'd obviously given many ideas and teachings and so on. And what she had left of him, she packaged together and called it the Sunni path. She argued that she knew what Islam truly was, and that follow me because I'm Aisha, I'm the wife of the deceased prophet. The thing is, however, and that's who's running Saudi Arabia, that's who's running the Sunni world. The thing is, I'm simply speaking as a historian and philosopher, that girl, bless her, however clever and wise she was, could not have understood what Islam actually meant as much as Ali did, who had been a Muslim for like a long, long time before she even came on the scene. She was an impressionable girl. She hero worshipped Muhammad. She loved him as if he was the sun rising out of the sky, and she elevated him onto a pedestal of absolute hero worship. Like, imagine, you're a 9-year-old girl, you marry the most important man in the whole world, who's a prophet of God. I mean, you'd be awestruck. And so her